So I just want to introduce you all to our new TDs. So this is a discussion. We're going to have a chat with everyone about the last year and the future of the party. As you know, we went from 6 TDs to 11 and 1 senator, our first senator ever, which is just absolutely fabulous. Our first and not last. So it is a very different experience in this term because we have so many more fantastic people that we can all work together and get our message out there. So you probably know all these people, so I'm just going to introduce them anyway. We have Aidan Farrelly beside me. Aidan is from Kildare North, and he is the Children and Youth spokesperson. We have Patricia Stephenson, our senator, and Patricia looks after the area of foreign affairs. We have Quaide from Cork East, and Liam is mental health, disabilities and rural affairs. And then we have Jen Cummins, Jen is in Dublin South Central, and Jen is our education spokesperson. And we have finally Pádraig Rice, who is Cork South Central. And have you waited the audience for? And Pádraig, as you all know, is our health spokesperson. So we'll get started. So, funnily enough, at the last conference, both Jen and Liam were sitting on a stage like this, and they were candidates, and they were just contemplating and hopeful candidates and looking forward to an election campaign. So tell us, how's it been so far?
Go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on this with Jen just prior to coming on, and I would say it's been a very intense experience, never a dull moment. It's stressful at times, but it's really, like, my overall experience is that it's just an immense privilege to serve Cork East and to be part of a political party that has so much drive and ambition and so much hope for the future. I would say that, you know, there's such a variety of people that we come into contact with through our roles. We have such a depth of expertise available to us from in my own case, from advocacy groups like Mental Health Reform, Inclusion Ireland, Safeguarding Ireland, and I think all of that is really humbling. There's many surreal moments, I think, in Leinster House where we're rushing along corridors late at night, saying hello to people who were pretty much like celebrities to us before we got elected, with, you know, the voting bells thundering in the background. So there's a lot of that. I love the variety of moving from Leinster House midweek to going back to the constituency on Monday to Friday. There is a strain on family life. I've 2 young children, and myself and my wife don't have extended family living close by, so it's taken a while to get into a kind of a rhythm with that works. But it's one of the reasons I feel very fortunate to be in the Social Democrats, is that there's a real attunement to family commitments, accommodating that, and the need to have a life outside politics.
Yeah, 100%. We're all in the same boat, really, isn't it?
Yep.
You know, so we all look after each other as much as we can. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I can't believe I'm sitting here. 2 years ago, sure, it was only a dream. You think, wow, that would possibly not going to happen. And actually, I was so nervous 2 years ago that Carly Bailey had to nearly talk me down. I was like, okay. And so here we are 2 years later, and I'm still nervous, but probably not as much as then, because I suppose it's a little bit like a hurricane. It comes around, it goes so fast. Every day, the days are really long, really, really, really long, but the weeks and the months go really fast. I have to say I really miss my family because I don't see them as much as I did before. And I have 4 children, as many of you know, and a husband who's here, my daughter's here. And you know, I know TDs outside Dublin see their children less than Dublin TDs, but sometimes by the time I get home, it's so late that they're asleep, or if I do get home a little bit earlier, I actually can't string a sentence together anymore because I've talked so much in the Dáil or at different times. So, you know, I think that has been a huge adjustment for me. I think do you know what I love about it is being able to represent the people of Dublin South Central, listen to their views, represent them in the Dáil, and help people who are in really dire situations in a way that I couldn't do in my previous roles. And I have a really amazing team. Amy and Katie, they're here as well. And of course, the branch are the ones who got me here. And I missed them at the beginning. After getting elected, I didn't see them for a while, and I really missed them because in the campaign we'd spent so much time together that so it's been it's been amazing, and it's wonderful to work along such talented people who really, really care. So being part of this party is reflected in our parliamentary party of people who work really, really hard, who, you know, we're dedicated to social democracy, but also our constituents. So it's been absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
And you know, we're really blessed actually, because I'm sure, you know, you'll know, but we have such a fantastic experienced team. You know, like every single one of the parliamentary party brings huge experience to the team, which I think is a real strength of ours, and I do think it's showing. So, Aidan, you have a lot of experience in the youth in the area of, so how is that helping you in your role in the Soc Dems?
Ultimately, it's what drove me into politics, actually, is that experience of working with children and young people for 15, 16 years in communities around Kildare that consistently had to experience poverty, marginalisation, discrimination, who found themselves, and I got so long into it that I was working with older brothers and sisters, and then the next generation of children and young people were experiencing the same thing, and I found myself getting so frustrated because you're working with people who have such potential and deserve an equal start. And so then when I started to just consistently get so frustrated, Aisling sat down, my wife, with me one night, and she goes, well, if you're going to keep giving out, you might as well go in and try and give it a go.
That's what wives are for.
Ultimately, that's like, it was the opportunity to make change. And just like Liam and Jenna said, like, the privilege to be now in Leinster House to try and achieve that change is really, really important. But the hunger to take that next step into government, and then to make sure that the Social Democrats' policies are in a programme for government, is what drives me every Tuesday morning when I'm on my way up to Leinster House. That's the potential, I think.
Are you going to still wear your youth worker hoodie when we're in government?
I 100%, like, this is so uncomfortable. Like,
Here.
You know, and I find myself like I'm such a sellout, but I did it. I wore the hoodie in one time because there was a conversation in the Dáil about antisocial behaviour about young people, and consistently, straight away, let's other them. Let's make sure we label them with every stereotype that we think fits a young person. And now we see all the furore about a social media ban, despite the evidence telling us that won't work. Let's bang that drum, and let's make sure that we can control that. If we start to listen to young people's voices, suddenly you start to see the world in a whole different way. And I think that's what I'm privileged to bring from my professional experience.
100%. Patricia, you have a really wide and varied experience in the area of foreign affairs. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, when you're working in a sector and all of your colleagues are working in that sector, you don't necessarily realise that it's helpful experience. And I think coming into politics, I realised how useful and unique it actually was. So I spent about 6 years in East Africa. I worked for the EU as a diplomat, so I'm really comfortable in kind of the importance of sort of multilateralism and engaging in multilateralism, and kind of worked in human rights as well. And so I suppose it's really helped me, particularly around things like obviously Gaza and all of the other forgotten crises that we have, Sudan, what we're seeing in Iran, of course in Ukraine as well, because I worked in peace building. So I have that experience of working with grassroots communities and understanding really, really what peace building means. And it has helped me in many ways, I think, hold the government a bit more to account, because look, when things like the Occupied Territories Bill, which they are slow walking to the extreme, which I don't think they really want to pass, it is just about international law. It is about meeting our international law obligations. And if we can't do that, if Ireland can't do that as a partner with the international community, with colleagues within in the EU, but also within the UN and partners in the Global South, we will lose that credibility. And I have that first-hand experience of being overseas and seeing how much people value Ireland and what Ireland can bring to global peace. But you know, if we don't actually practice that, like we're preaching, oh God, are we preaching? But the government are not getting to that place of actually practicing what they preach, and Ireland will eventually lose that credibility. And so that experience for me has really strengthened, I think, my ability to advocate for that. So I'm, very lucky.
And Pádraig, you have the area of health, right, which is such a big area, but an area we have been so strong on since our foundation because of the work that Roisin did. But you have expertise and experience in that area. So can you go into how that's helping you in this role?
Absolutely, and health is a key issue for this party, and Roisin Shortall did tremendous work on the all-party group on Sláinte Care and setting out a blueprint for the future of healthcare in this country, and I think it's a real credit to this party, the work we've done in healthcare, and work that I'm proud to continue on. So prior to my election, I worked in Leinster House for 4 years. I first worked with a senator, and then when I worked with Cian O'Callaghan, our deputy leader, in his office. And that gave me real grounding in politics and understanding how the political system works. With Colette, worked on a range of issues around adult safeguarding legislation, which got all the way through the Seanad. We worked with the Alzheimer's Society, advocating on their behalf in terms of improving services and supports for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And then with Cian O'Callaghan, I worked in terms particularly on housing and homelessness. But beyond that, I have worked in the not-for-profit sector, and that's where a lot of my health expertise comes from. I ran a local organisation here in Cork, and I worked nationally as a policy and research manager, and particularly in the area of sexual health. And that was one of the things I championed when I got elected to the Dáil. The previous National Sexual Health Strategy ran out in 2022, and I was a lone voice in the Dáil this year calling for a new strategy because the government had no strategy, no plan, no action plan in terms of sexual health. And I'm glad that we do now have a plan finally, and that's been published, and we're going to continue to push the government to have an implementation of that strategy over the next 10 years. And crucially in that, real absence around trans healthcare, and an issue that I've been championing as well, completely absent from that strategy. And we know there are people waiting over 10 years to get their initial appointment in terms of trans healthcare. So these are issues that I took from my previous experience working in LGBT organisations in the not-for-profit sector and bringing them into the Dáil. But also with that broader understanding around how minority communities in our country are affected by the decisions made in the Dáil, people with disabilities, people who are migrants, women, and how we need to think about equality in the broadest sense and have that at the centre of our policies and continue to consistently advocate for a fairer, more equal Ireland for everybody.
Yeah, because it's so frustrating, like we're such a wealthy country and yet we're leaving so many people behind. So look, my next question, honestly, we could probably talk for hours on this, right? So this government has broken many promises, and they've only been in for the last year, but which are the biggest promises, do you think, and the worst promises that they've broken to date? So we'll start with Liam.
Yeah, I think the one that stands out for me is one that was the subject of our recent private members bill, which was just around cost of disability. So it's been long recognised by research as far back as 2004 that living with a disability comes with major additional financial costs, and that's related to things like equipment, transport, healthcare. And the government themselves have actually acknowledged this in their programme for government. So they've committed to introducing a permanent cost of disability that would relieve some of this financial burden. But lo and behold, they didn't enact that in the recent budget. And not only that, they stripped away some of the one-off measures that were in place prior to that, resulting in disabled people being €1,400 per year worse off than they were the previous year. We had a couple of meetings in Leinster House, one demonstration and a meeting in the audiovisual room around this. We heard really harrowing testimony from one woman in particular who had to suspend home dialysis because of energy costs and had to rely on hospital dialysis, which put her health more at risk. So we followed the lead of the disability organisations, and we proposed just a stopgap €400 emergency winter payment that would help disabled people.
It's a modest
Absolutely.
proposal. Like, yeah.
Absolutely, and it would have benefited 310,000 people. And we made that case, it's an inarguable case. It was backed by all the disability groups. In fact, it was led by them. And instead, what we got back from Dara Calleary was the contention that we were engaging in, quote, dangerous and misleading narratives. When we said that disabled people are forced into a dilemma of having to choose between heating and eating. And we were merely echoing the words of disabled people themselves. So for me, that's the one that's stuck, I think.
And what really stuck out for me that day as well, because he was talking about, well, we're going to have a consultation. So on one hand, he's saying we're going to listen to disabled people, and the other hand, he's saying, actually, what they're saying isn't true, which, is just absolutely ridiculous. Jen, what do you reckon?
Where do I start? In education. My other brief is further in higher education. So I think the thing that sticks out the most for me is the fees, the student contribution fees, which should just be called student fees because it's not a contribution if it's like the amount of money that it is. So, I mean, the maths movements of that, we're going to do this and it was so confusing. But the reality is that the fees have gone up this year. So that is putting more and more families who are sending young people to college, it's moving them in a position that they're not going to be able to do that. For students who are self-funded, that's also very, very difficult. So we've seen promises, and they keep saying these words of, year one of a 5-year, the year one of a budget and it's going to roll over 5 years, and we're going to work our way up. And I keep saying in the Dáil is that, are you saving all of the good news up for just before an election? And that's really what I think has been seen. They were going to cut the student fees, they didn't. They've put them up, so you can do whatever maths magic that you think you're doing and saying, they were 1,000 less and now it's 500, but this isn't going to be a one-off cut. It doesn't matter. 500 is 500. Like, if it's more by 500, it is more. So that's that one. In terms of education, I think the thing that comes to my office the most is the broken promises about appropriate school places for children with additional needs. 100%. Like, it is 2026 that there is any child sitting at home without an appropriate school place. It is a disgrace. I'm looking at Samantha O'Flanagan in the front row there, who has been fighting with everybody to try and get the spaces for her school in Stapall and Educate Together National School. That school is newly built. The structures around supporting children with additional needs have to be put there. When we're building new schools, we need to, and when they already know what the needs are, that needs to be built in from the very beginning. Children with additional needs should never be an afterthought, and that is how they're being treated. And I think that, for me, is one of the biggest broken promises that they've made. They're making the system so complicated that we're actually having a meeting next week to try and figure out, I feel like I'm being gaslit, to be honest with you, because sometimes I'm going, so it's this way or it's this way, and they're making it so complicated for parents who are already, it's difficult to look after a child with additional needs, with complex needs. You may have many children who have additional needs in your family, and then making the system so exclusionary is just wrong. And just one last thing, the fact that there were people outside Dáil Éireann on hunger strike because of the broken promises this government has made is an absolute disgrace. And I want to commend Councillor Noel Brown. Yesterday, Councillor Noel Brown brought a motion to this conference, and I'm delighted to see that it's passed. We can never, that broken promise, the damage that has done to those people is absolutely horrific. And that, for me, is one of the biggest broken promises that they've made. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, sometimes there's just no humanity in the decisions.
No humanity, absolutely.
Aidan, you have lots to
Look at the countdown clock here.
Use
all this time.
can I just, before we move on, Jen Cummins is the tightest chair I've ever come across, but she's chairing parliamentary meetings. She's bound, and there's a black mark,
I'm keeping an eye.
Black mark going against you there now, Jen.
The Minister Norma Foley has made certain announcements about a public model of childcare and piloting that. I think it's too early because we've seen no detail yet on that to really make a judgment call on that. But I also sit in the Public Accounts Committee, and I'm trying in earnest to follow in the footsteps of Catherine Murphy and the way in which she approached with such diligence the scrutiny and the questioning. But we were promised that we'd learn lessons from the bike shed. We were promised that we would take that opportunity to better manage taxpayers' money. And all I can say is, week in, week out, there is the equivalent of a bike shed in non-compliant procurement, in waste, in delay, in accountability when it comes to public funds. And I think the hands-off approach taken by government ministers with regards to departments and bodies within their aegis would fill nobody with confidence with regards to value for money, with regards to service delivery. Instead, what the government would rather do is blame us and blame communities for taking judicial reviews as if that's the fault of delay in infrastructure. It's an absolute show. And I think that's a real misstep, and I don't think it's going to improve under a Fine Gael Fianna Fáil government.
No. And I think, because we are very wealthy and we have a huge amount of money coming into the country, and I think in 10 years' time we're all going to be looking at each other going, where did the money go? Yeah. What did we do with it? How are we any better off?
What's the legacy?
Service, what's the legacy? Absolutely. Pádraig, you were talking earlier on about the strategy and how is there other sort of promises like that that government have.
There's an endless list of things that government has failed to deliver or failed to progress. And I think for me, I think infrastructure is key. And in the health area, we're not seeing the progress we need to see in terms of the new elective hospitals, the surgical hubs, the primary care centres. We really need to see progress in that area. We also need to see improved balanced regional development. I think there are areas right across the country where we're not seeing the investment in infrastructure. And we see it here in Cork. The government promised to build an event centre. The sod was turned on the event centre 10 years ago this week, when Taoiseach Enda Kenny, flanked by ministers from Fine Gael and Labour in the dying days of the 2016 general election, they all came to Cork, cut a ribbon, turned the sod and announced that the event centre would be built. 10 years later, we have a huge derelict site in the middle of our city centre, an eyesore left there and no progress. Same could be said for the promised Lewis line, the motorway to Limerick. I could go on and on about the kind of projects that have been promised that would make a real difference to people's lives that haven't been invested in. Just yesterday, I had engagements with the HSE around a promised centre in the city for people who are homeless, an integrated health centre that's been talked about for so long to provide a day service and to provide real supports for the hundreds of people in our city who need that support day in, day out. And they told me yesterday it'd be delayed by another year. And it's utterly unacceptable that we see delay after delay on these really crucial projects that could have a real impact on people's lives and some of the most vulnerable people who need those supports. And we need to invest right across the country. And the same could be said for Waterford, Galway, Limerick, all across the country. We need balanced regional development and we need investment in key projects that are going to improve people's lives.
And I think it's sort of, because what we do see, and I'm not sure which one of you mentioned it, but it's sort of before the election, there's all these promises, photo opportunities, launches, and you know, they get in based on those promises and then they just fall, you know, and it's just so frustrating. Patricia?
Well, I think for the Foreign Affairs portfolio, it has to be the Occupied Territories Bill, and we'll all remember both Simon Harris and Micheál Martin standing in Hustings saying, this will be a priority for us. You know, it was passed by both houses, both the Seanad and the Dáil, well before the last election. And so the idea that they are just prevaricating on it endlessly is so frustrating. I think I spent something like over 18 hours in the Foreign Affairs Committee last year hashing it out, and we got cross-party support for the recommendations to both pass it and to pass it with services. So the fact that we're still waiting for it is just absurd. And they're played with people. They made this, they said to people, we will pass this as a matter of urgency in the next government, vote for us. You know, it was pretty clear, along with all of the other things we've heard as well across the panel. So it's one of the most glaring ones because the bill was ready to go, and they've rewritten it, they've watered it down, and they couldn't get it over the line. And it just reeks of a lack of respect, I think, for the electorate and for the voice and the vote of the Irish people.
And I suppose because I think we could get really depressed listening to all this as well. So, but I think that's why it's so important that we continue to grow and we get bigger and we have more members and more people in the local communities working and really spreading that message, because there is huge opportunities. Like there is, you know, an opportunity to do things better, to do things differently. And we just need to be the ones at our vision, talking to people about how we would make things better for them in their daily lives, because I think we can't continue for people to be failed and let down over and over and over again. I actually think the societal risks from that are just so great. So that's a real challenge for us, is actually, you know, when you have all these people who feel left down, whether it's in area health or, you know, additional needs or mental health or, you know, whatever area, and people have to fight for the very basics and for what they're entitled to. Those people, they'll be making a choice, you know, which way are they going to go? And I think it's really important that we are a very strong voice for a positive future and an inclusive future, you know, but one that's better and that delivers for people. And I think that's hugely important.
As well, and I think that whole piece around social cohesion, isn't it? You know, and I think you point on that, like we do risk kind of the fabric of our society being undermined by these expectations that are continuously broken. And it's something that we can certainly, I think we will be focusing on.
And one thing, and I suppose this is just something to you know, like there's other sort of bad actors that are actually going in and trying to be that support for vulnerable communities. And whilst they're providing, you know, support in one area, they're also feeding them this negative, horrible, divisive narrative and there's just such a risk with that. So there is actually a real responsibility on us as parliamentarians, as members, as councillors, you know, that we actually use our voices and our platforms to fight that, because you know, the risk, it is quite great. I think, you know, we don't want to go the way other countries have gone, and I think we all know who I'm talking about there.
But I think, Jen, that goes back to your earlier question of why we got involved in politics. And I think, you know, certainly for me, it was because I was working in communities where, you know, they're not represented in Dáil Éireann. I've spoken several times in Dáil Éireann about poverty and trauma and the fact that things are absolutely dire for people. And I actually think people in there were shocked by that. I genuinely think that they have no idea. There are, not everybody, I'm speaking very generally there are people in Dáil Éireann who do not and have never seen the level of deprivation that exists throughout this country. It's not just in my constituency, it is through every part of this country. And I think that's probably why many of us got involved in politics, is because it becomes very difficult to see the problems all the time and then go, hold on, there's a way that we can do this differently. And so that to say, okay, I might put my hand up then. You know what I mean? So
there's a real disconnect between government and the people. Like, I'm in the Dáil and I'm listening to Micheál Martin, who's a constituency colleague of mine in the Taoiseach, and I hear him talk, and I'm like, did you knock on the same doors that I knocked on? Did you talk to the same people that I spoke to across our city and county, who are living in overcrowded housing, who are on health waiting lists, who have children with special needs who can't get a school place, and just this real disconnect, and it's something that we need to address.
Absolutely. So I think very shortly we're going to be going to RT. I'm just waiting for the signal. So we want everybody to be on their best behaviour. But I think, look at that, that's a really important conversation to have. And what we want is for that conversation to continue over the day and keep going with it. But I would like to just now welcome the viewers from home who are watching in to our Social Democrats 2026 conference here in Cork. We have a panellist here today of our new public representatives, our new parliamentarians. So here we have Aidan Farrelly, who is our TD from Kildare North. We have Senator Patricia Stephenson. We have Liam Quaide, who is our TD for Cork East. Jen Cummins, who is our TD for Dublin South Central, and we have Pádraig Rice, who's our TD for Cork South Central. So welcome to everybody at home. So look, when it comes to politics, we really are what it says on the tin, right? We are Social Democrats, that's our name, that's what our values are. But for some of our viewers today, Patricia, people may not really know what social democracy is. Can you explain it a bit for us?
I'll do my best. I think social democracy is really a very simple concept. You know, it's about creating a society and a state that basically has a social safety net. It has a floor through which no one will drop, because we will have free health care, because we will have free child care, because we will have all of the services that will protect people, even those vulnerable people, even people with disabilities, or perhaps women who are fleeing a domestic violence situation. It's about creating that baseline through which no one will fall under. And so it's linked to that, it's about driving down the cost of living with free public services, and using the billions of surpluses that we have correctly. You know, whilst we have these billions of government surpluses in Ireland, we still have rising child poverty. And a social democratic government would be the opposite of that. We would be addressing that child poverty with our surpluses. It's also about, it's about inclusion, it's about equality, it's about social justice. But really, you know, it's about spending our money wisely and providing for people, and a state that looks after people, an idea of the collective and the community, and leaving no one behind. So it's a really simple thing, and I think it's a great thing, and I think it's a thing that can, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about social cohesion and divisions within communities. I think it can address those concerns, because it's about bringing everyone up to the same level and looking after them.
And I do actually think that out of every country in the world. Like Ireland is a social democratic country. We may not call it social democratic, but I think the values that Irish people have about community, looking after each other, you know, the importance, recognising the importance of those public services, that's sort of in our DNA.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's a very positive thing for us. So it's about building on that really. If we were to think, well, if there was a social democratic government, because that's where we want to be. We want to be in government.
Not if.
Not if. When.
When.
What would it look like for people? What's the sort of tangible change that people could see in their lives? Aidan, what do you think? You're the spokesperson for children and youth. So what would that look like for parents and young people?
I think a Social Democrats government wouldn't govern based on electoral cycles and headlines, but actually look at the evidence that is before us, the research, the facts. So an example of that, look at childcare and early years education. Children and young people have a right to education in this country. That must be extended to a right to early years education and childcare. What you do then is you copper fasten the issues regarding cost, capacity and conditions for workers. The bigger issue for me, though, in terms of what a Social Democrats government would look like, it is indefensible to me that children are experiencing the levels of poverty in this country where hundreds of thousands of children and growing must be resilient, must be determined, must be all of these attributes whilst their childhood is robbed. And the government tell us this is a priority. Everything is a priority for this government, but there's no action. They might set up a unit in the Department of Taoiseach. They might have seminars. They might have research reports. But where is the action? The research tells us a second tier of child benefit would have a drastic impact on affecting child poverty in this country. What happened in the last budget? Nothing. They'll tell us school meals is an impact. Is school meals an impact?
Yeah, it's a massive impact on it. Is so essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is so essential. And it's for every child. It's essential for every child, but it's specifically essential for children who are hungry. That's why it started. It started because there's children in this country who are hungry. And when you're hungry, you can't learn. So in order to never stigmatise anyone, rolling that out to everyone is actually what a social democracy does. You make things universal so that no one is ever stigmatised. And we need to make sure that there are no children hungry so that they can't learn, because that has a knock-on effect. But you're right, but that it starts at early education. It's so they can't be divorced from one another. It's a building blocks. You know, early childhood education means that when you get into primary school, you've already got a very solid foundation.
Yeah, but you were talking earlier on, Jen, as well, though, about children with additional needs. And I think any of us who've ever, you know, we've all obviously canvassed. I think probably most of our audience here have canvassed at one stage or other. And the amount of doors you go to where parents who have children who have those additional educational needs, they're just not being supported. So I think that would be a key thing that, you know, Social Democrats and government would absolutely prioritise that and ensure that that educational support was there.
You know, the whole thing about special education, which I have to say under social democracy, we might have to change the name, because, you know, special education, what does that say? You know, it's education, actually. And when we are educating people in the way that we're looking at the individual and we're wrapping around a service for that young person, whether they have, you know, whatever their additional need is. So, you know, in addition to what other people might need, we need to wrap that service around that child, and it needs to be fundamentally supportive to the child and their family so that they can learn to the best of their ability. And at the moment, what we have is not that. We need to be building schools that have those structures there, that the system is seamless so that you are not othered. I think that is the thing that comes in my office so often, is that young people, children, are othered and they're excluded from our education system. And that is absolutely not acceptable. It's also, from an educational disadvantage perspective, our education system needs to have a trauma-informed lens. That means we need to recognise what is going on for young people and make sure that our structures are not so rigid and our education system isn't so rigid that it's that only and everything else is secondary. And, you know, the social democracy sees the individual and it builds the structures around them. It doesn't have the structures that are so rigid and if you don't fit into it, that's your problem. So we need to go back to basics here. Education is a human right. An appropriate education is written in our constitution, but there are children in this country who do not get that. And we need to move away from that. And that's for me as education spokesperson, that has been such a vital piece of work. It is a huge, and it comes into every one of our offices, I have to say.
Yeah, I can see Liam actually nodding away there. I think he's in complete agreement, and there'll be a lot of overlap with your work on this.
Absolutely, and I was just thinking back to when our former co-leader, Catherine Murphy, came to visit me in Middleton during the last election. She said that the message that we can give voters is that we're going to get the basics right.
Yeah.
And that's a very simple message, but I think it's become a transformative one because the basics are just not being met across virtually every sector of society, whether it's health, housing, disability, public transport if you live in a rural community. And it's almost like as if the basics are now some unattainable ideal. And just coming back to disability, I've recently become involved with a really remarkable campaign group called Before We Die, and they're made up mainly of parents who are often quite elderly, in their 70s, their 80s, or even older, who have adult sons or daughters with an intellectual disability, and they are facing into an absolute abyss with regard to the long-term circumstances of their son or daughter. They've no idea where, after they die, their son or daughter is going to live, what level of support they'll have, what level of connection, if any, they'll have with their community of origin. And what I've learned over the past year is that almost invariably, a person with an intellectual disability will be offered a residential placement only when they reach a crisis point. And the tiers of support that would have helped avert getting to that stage just haven't been there, or they've been very threadbare. So it's very often in the context of one of their parents dying. So on top of that bereavement, they have the traumatic upheaval of having to move maybe 100, 200 kilometres from home. Those emergency placements will often become their long-term destination. They're being provided by private for-profit companies. The government is increasing the proportion of residential placements that they are funding through this method. And meanwhile, there's really innovative, progressive voluntary agencies like the Marisa Foundation, who operate in the southeast, in the Dublin commuter belt, and in the Midlands, who are actually relying on the rental market for a substantial amount of their properties. These private for-profit companies are building up large property portfolios because they're receiving such large sums from the state. So this is just all wrong on every level. It's not even remotely economical, not to mind the human rights cost of it. So what a social democratic government would provide is that a disabled person would have access to the full range of supports within their community, and barriers to employment would be abolished. Access to education would be provided within their community, and that the UNCRPD would become a reality. It's not just an abstract concept, and that we would have integrated long-term planning for services, coming back to Aidan's point, that we're not just in it for this election term.
I think pulling back from the whole privatisation, because what we're seeing is this sort of, a continual privatisation of public services, whether it's, mental health supports or disability services or housing, child, it's this, and it's just happening slowly but consistently.
Absolutely.
So I think, part of our task will be to pull that back so that we have services, fundamental services for communities that are within the public
good
remit. I think that would be hugely important. Pádraig, from the sort of health portfolio, from that perspective, what would our social democratic government, what change would we bring in?
Yes, so from a health perspective, Social Democrats in government would deliver a public healthcare system that people can rely on. A system that is there for you when you get sick, so you're not worried about waiting long periods of time, paying out huge amounts of money. A public healthcare system delivered in your community near you, one that you can rely on. The right care in the right place at the right time. And what's really crucial here is that we have a plan. Thanks to our former leader, Roisin Shortall, who's here with us, who led out the work on Sláinte Care. The plan for universal healthcare in Ireland, we have a blueprint, we just need to implement it, and in government we would do that. And that would mean that people right across the country wouldn't face these very long waiting lists, wouldn't be paying €60 to see the GP every time, wouldn't be worried. And I think a huge part is just the worry people have. And this is what I see in my own constituency in talking to people when you meet them on the door, and in particularly older people who are just really worried about getting sick, about worrying about finding themselves on a trolley in an A&E and getting sicker while they wait there. And that shouldn't be the case. The government should be there to support people, to have that safety net under them. And core to that is a public healthcare system, universal healthcare for everybody in the country.
Yeah.
And I think, Jennifer, it's really important to say that we are outliers in Europe in terms of the delivery of healthcare, where we have this part private, part public, with so many people falling through the gaps. Across Europe, they have healthcare systems that people can depend on, people can rely on, that are there for them. And this is the work that I've been doing in the Dáil, and in the coming weeks, we're going to put as a party, we're going to put a spotlight on this again in terms of delivery of universal healthcare. But there, as you said earlier about the privatisation, we're still seeing the creeping privatisation of health services. Yeah. We see this, one of the areas I've worked on is around cancer care. And it's really deeply frustrating because the state has invested and there's some new radiation machines, but we don't have the staff to operate them. In other areas, there's broken or damaged machines that aren't working properly, that break and are faulty, and there isn't a proper repair program in place. And then at the same time, we're seeing millions and millions of euro being spent outsourcing services to the private sector. So that money, like the €30 million being spent outsourcing, should be invested in the public system, should be there to repair the radiation machines, to hire the staff, to keep the people in there, and to deliver the best cancer care for people. And that's what people deserve right across the country. So we have to stop this privatisation. We also have a massive over-reliance on agency staff. Hundreds of millions of euro is spent every year, €470 million spent on agency staff. And this is not good for the workers, it's not good for the health service, it's not good for the patients. These people should be provided with employment within our public health service, provided with good terms and conditions, decent jobs, and so that the patient at the end sees the same person and not a kind of rotation of people moving in and out, and that we provide that we need to really staff the services and have that services there that people can rely on and depend on. And crucially, services that are near you, in your community, well-resourced GP services, so people aren't waiting weeks to get access to a GP, which is happening in some of our constituencies, particularly in inner city areas. Huge waiting lists for GPs. People can't even, in some areas, can't even get on a GP list. Similarly, experiences in rural Ireland as well, people waiting to get on. And as I said, then the huge out-of-pocket costs, which are not the normal, and we shouldn't accept them, and we won't accept them in government. And in government, the Social Democrats will transform our healthcare services for the people of Ireland.
For our members in the room, they know that this is possible, and lots of our members have worked with us along the way on a lot of these ideas. But for the people watching at home, I think Pádraig touched on it, like in terms of healthcare and where we stand with the rest of Europe. But all of the things that we've said today are possible with the right government and with a government that actually has vision, because the money is there in Ireland. We famously know the money is there in Ireland, but it's actually just not being spent and prioritised on the right people. So I think that's an important message for people at home. This isn't an impossible utopia that we're describing. It's something that is tangible, that we have policies for, and that the state has funding for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And you'd see this on PAC all the time, like this wastage of money. Yep. And I think anyone, looking in will be well aware of, all those controversies, whether it's the bike shed or the steps that are just costing millions. Yeah. And it's just, we just seem to keep on wasting precious money that should be spent on public services.
Yeah. And we lose the opportunity to learn the lesson from each case as well. We need oversight. We need accountability. And sitting on the Public Accounts Committee is a real, real privilege, because you have the opportunity to see different departments, different public bodies come before you and rationalise their expenditure. But the levels of waste still show us why the trust within society, I think, is broken with regards to how our taxes are being spent. because whether it's your local property tax or whether it's your income, you don't tend to see the services come back.
That's your value for money.
It's absent, which then when you see waste coupled with absence of services, that's when that trust breaks down even further. I think the problem with the Public Accounts Committee, and it's just the way it is that it's often in hindsight when you're looking back on 2024 expenditure. What we need actually is a government that will take public expenditure seriously at the time. Oversight over significant capital investments like the hospital, take oversight now in real time, and to make sure that checks and balances are in place with regards to value for money, with regards to the impact that these services will have, and to make sure if decisions are made that are not in the best interest of the taxpayer, that there's accountability for that, that there's lessons to be learned from that.
Because it's very hard for people who are at home and they're seeing the incredible costs of energy, incredible costs of their food when they go to shops. You know, they're struggling, they're really, really counting their pennies, and they don't see a similar approach from government to tax money. You know, like, I think it's very hard for people to understand that, and you can, you know, people are just so frustrated when they see all those failures.
Yeah.
Jen, do you want
Can I come in on that? Because the cost of education is something, you know, it is preventative for so many people. Education is supposed to be free at primary and secondary. And unfortunately, we have this thing called a voluntary contribution. And I spoke about it in the Dáil earlier in the week. It actually can sometimes not be voluntary. There is huge pressure being put on parents to cough up money that they may or may not have to fundamentally fund our education system, because the capitation grants given to schools is not enough. There's such pressures on schools to be able to deliver all the things that they want to deliver, but they are stuck. They just don't have enough. So parents are then being relied on to, and it's hundreds of euro, you know, in a system that should be free. The other thing I'd like to say about it in terms of, you know, Aidan said it earlier, we have evidence, we have, you know, methodologies how to do these things. In education, what we see is the endless rollout of pilots. And it's almost as if we're the only country in the world who ever has anything to do about special education or education disadvantage or different pilots that they have, but everything is a pilot. And then eventually it gets rolled out, or it doesn't, or it goes on for so long that it becomes the actual way we work, but it's not monitored and evaluated. And that's seen throughout all aspects of our life, that we roll things out, we don't monitor and evaluate it. It's as if why don't we look at countries who do it really, really well? You know, and copying is good, you know. It's good to copy things that are positive and make sure that it's appropriate to here, it's contextualized for here, but that, you know, at the end of the day, when we are relying on parents to fund a system that is a public service, this is a big challenge for our education system. It's the same at third level. We're reliant on students with this student contribution fee, and third level institutions are telling us that they are not funded enough. And, you know, were they relying on private companies or industry to fund them to do the basic necessities of where we need to go in the future? What sort of learning, what sort of advancements are we going to have to future-proof, like whatever is going to happen? There are jobs now that don't even exist. You know, in 20 years, the young people who are in school now, the jobs that they'll be doing maybe don't even exist. So we need to have third-level institutions that can respond to that. But they can't be reliant only on industry for that. It needs to be publicly funded.
On that point in waste, and we see this in the health service as well, we waste a lot of money because we treat people when they're the sickest in acute hospitals, when it costs the most, when sometimes we've left it far too late for the person. And what we need to do is invest in primary care, in community care, in GP care, and to prevent and do more work on prevention and preventing people from becoming sick, prevent that long-term illness, prevent people from ending up in A&Es or hospitals or needing those more expensive treatments. And that's where we need to shift the focus and shift the investment to the community, to primary care. And I chair the Oireachtas Health Committee, and one of the areas we've been putting a focus on is public dental care. It's a really neglected service, and we're currently writing a report that we're going to publish to highlight key recommendations about how we can transform dental care under public provision. And one part of that is children and young people are meant to be screened 3 times in primary school. There was a case given to us where one person drove himself to his first dental screening. He was 18. Hadn't been seen at all in primary school. And what we need to do, and that's the prevention work, we need to have the prevention, teach people good dental hygiene as a young person, spot those cavities early on, get those fillings done, and not leave people for 18 years with no access to a public dental system. It is utterly unacceptable. It's a broken system, and it absolutely needs to be reformed.
Absolutely. So look, the party is now 10 years old. I think, you know, we've come so far. We really have. We've grown so big, and we've such support across the country now. But I know we want to grow bigger. We're going to be in government. We want to have as much influence as possible on the decision making in this country to try help as many people as possible. So how do we grow even bigger than we are now? What would you say to any of our viewers who are sort of thinking, you know what, I never thought politics was for me, but actually I like what they're saying. How can people get involved? Liam?
One message that I think is important to emphasise is, I think there's a lot of people out there who maybe feel a lot of passion for politics, who know in their heart of hearts that they would make a good representative, but maybe experience quite a bit of anxiety or perhaps terrified about putting themselves out there. And what I would say to those people is feel the fear and do it anyway, because I think we need more people in politics who are in touch with their vulnerability. We need more sensitive people in politics, and we need to see sensitivity as a strength. You also need tenacity and drive and all those other qualities, I think, in politics. But I think at the core is a sense of compassion and connection with people. And I think it's true being connected with your own vulnerability. That's like a portal into, you know, the struggles that your constituents will have and the other people you represent. And we have enough people in politics who are emotionally calcified or shut down. So that's a message I would like to put out there.
That is such an important message, because it is a scary thing to do, right? You're really going out of your comfort zone.
And I remember my first public meeting was in Youghal in the Walter Raleigh Hotel. It was to do with restoring the Youghal Middleton train link. And I remember my voice was quavering, my hand was shaking as I was handing out a microphone. But I'm so glad I stuck with it.
And so are we.
Add to Liam's message about, you know, if you're fearful, go for it anyway. I think when it comes specifically to the Social Democrats, that if you are fearful, there is a great party, and both our members, our councillors, our TDs, our senator, you know, people are very we make it, and we have a great team of organisers who make it their priority to bring people who are interested in running for election along the way, building up their skills, supporting them, and that will be here. So if there are people watching at home who are like, this interests me, but I am scared, you will find a great home here, and you will find a lot of people who will look after you and support you and will help you overcome those fears. And so, like, as Holly always says, join us, because there is so much opportunity for you in the Social Democrats.
Jen? I think it's also really important to say that there's not just one way to get involved. You don't have to run for election. There's so many other ways that you can get involved. You can join us and you can support our movement. I couldn't do my work every day without the staff in my office, without my branch and the members locally who help me out, without my campaign team and 100 volunteers who help get me elected. So if our messages resonate with you, sign up to Social Democrats, become a party member, get involved. You can help deliver leaflets, you can help us canvass, you can get involved and work for the party. There are so many ways that you can contribute, as well as running for election, which is crucially important, but I know it's just not for everyone. But if you're at home and if you're listening to us, our clear message is get involved, you won't regret it.
The biggest learning for me to get involved in the first place was to acknowledge that I'm political. Because a lot of people don't, I think, see themselves as political, yet all of the issues around them are all stemming from a political place. So you can be political with a big P, you can be political with a small p, really it is whatever you want it to be. But I think despite all of the issues that we've spoken about here this morning, I think the consistent thing for us is that we're still hopeful. And I think we're still very clearly hopeful of what a better Ireland can look like and our role in that, whether that's in the branch, whether that's as a councillor, as a TD, as a senator. Because if it's not your voice, it's going to be somebody else's voice. And if now is not the best time, then when is? It's not going to be perfect. Google us, click the join now button, do it. Why not?
Yeah. Give it a shot, absolutely.
I think, like, I never thought I'd be involved in politics, actually, and here I am. But like, I think that politics is all around us. It informs every single part of our lives. And I know when I've knocked on doors, people say, oh, I'm not into politics. And then I'd say, but, you know, like the local park, or how much your groceries cost, you know, healthcare system, all these things that's politics, because there's people making decisions on behalf of this country. And are they the decisions that you would make if you had the possibility to do that? And as others have said, you don't have to be the candidate. There's no way I would be elected without my family, my branch, and now there's no way I'd be able to do my work without my team, because politics isn't one person. We're the people who represent that. We're here. There's far fewer of us up here than there is in this room, and those people in this you know, party who are not here. And the most important thing that I think that if it's resonating with people at home, is that we bring a humanity to politics that has been missing for a very long time. We need to look at what our society wants to be. We know what it doesn't want to be, and we have solutions as to what it will be and what it can be if we're in government. So I would say join us, be part of this human movement to bring back the humanity to this country. So that's what I would say.
So I think our time is up, so I want to thank our panel. Really interesting conversations, and I hope not only did the message get out to the people in this room, but I hope there's people who are watching in there thinking, you know what, I think I'll give them a shot because they look like they know what they're talking about. And the heart's in the right place, I think, is really important.